I tested the best mirrorless cameras, and I quickly realized the best mirrorless cameras for photos is very different than the best mirrorless camera for videos, because a good camera is very specialized. So in this video, I'm gonna help you find the perfect mirrorless camera for you, specifically for whatever you're shooting. The Sony A7IV is a camera that almost does it all. It has a brand new 33 megapixel full frame sensor that gives you insanely detailed photos and really impressive 4K. And the full frame sensor inside of this camera actually helps give your photos and videos a really cinematic and movie-like quality. Also, if you guys want to check out the A7IV, I'll leave links in the description down below for the best pricing along with the other cameras in this video. One of my favorite things about the A7IV is that it's built like a professional camera with a super solid and customizable body, but at a much cheaper price than a professional full frame camera. It has 3 custom dials, a joystick, a scroll wheel. You can set this camera up exactly how you want it for your shooting style. And it also has in-body stabilization along with gyro data to further stabilize the footage using Sony's Catalyst Browse software. Because of the 33 megapixel sensor, you're able to shoot an insane amount of detail in your photos, being able to zoom into even the tiniest little detail. And when it comes to photos, it shoots at 10 frames per second up to 823 photos, easily making the A7IV a phenomenal action camera, travel camera, sports camera, anything you want to shoot. Although I have to say there are cameras later in this list that shoot as high as 30 frames or 40 frames per second using an electronic shutter. But 10 frames per second is kind of the sweet spot for most professionals and enthusiasts. And Sony does a really phenomenal job with the autofocusing system, so your autofocus is going to be able to keep up with all these fast photos. And nowadays, pretty much everyone shoots a ton of video as well. And I love the 4K in the A7IV, but it has 2 minor things that pros and serious enthusiasts should be aware of. Now, it shoots 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second like most cameras, but it's not just regular 4K. It's downsampled from 7K with 10-bit color, so you're really getting the rich quality of a 7K image, but in a smaller, easier to edit 4K file. And you're capturing everything in real cinema quality because the A7IV also has S-Log3 and S-Gamut 3 for advanced color grading along with dual native ISO. But it does have a downside. Slow motion is becoming really important for music videos, fashion, sports, and pretty much everything because it looks really cool. On the A7IV in 4K at 60 frames per second mode, your camera has a pretty serious crop. So it's no longer 7K downsampled because your camera is throwing away almost half the sensor, but also you get a pretty massive zoom into your image. Now, if you're just getting a quick slow motion shot here and there, you won't really notice the crop and you probably won't really care. But it is important to note that you no longer have that full frame look, which is the main reason you want to buy this camera. Now, if you do want, you can also shoot at full HD at 60 frames per second where there is no crop, so you maintain that full frame look, but it's no longer 4K. However, one thing that really disappoints me on the A7IV is that when you're shooting in full HD at 120 frames per second, it's no longer 10-bit color and only 8-bit, which is pretty disappointing news for video shooters. The A7IV is a great hybrid camera that balances photos and video features really well. It's a great fit for both enthusiasts and professionals, but it is missing slow motion features that I find a lot of people are looking for. But if you are someone that's really into video, I have 2 cameras later for you in this list that you definitely want to stick around for because those cameras are absolute powerhouses when it comes to video. Now, some of you guys might want something smaller in terms of body and also budget without sacrificing any of the features and quality. And you guys should definitely check out the brand new Canon R50 and its little brother and also cheaper brother, the Canon M50 Mark II. Both cameras have a 24 megapixel crop sensor, which is about half the size of the full frame sensor from the A7IV, but it's more than fine for casual shooters. The Canon R50 shoots at a super fast rate of 15 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode, which is actually faster than the A7IV, and the M50 Mark II shoots slightly slower at 10 frames per second, which is the same speed as the A7IV. Both cameras are phenomenal for capturing action and even better for portraits. The biggest thing to note about the Canon R50 is that it shoots 4K and 30 frames per second in downsampled 6K, so you get that gorgeous 6K image but in a small 4K file size, and it also does full HD at 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second. Only 2 years ago, if you gave me a camera that had these features, you would have to pay thousands of dollars, but the Canon R50 is less than $1,000. So if you're a young professional looking to get started, or you're simply an enthusiast that wants a top-notch camera, the R50 is definitely a camera you want to look at. And the little brother, the Canon M50, does full HD only up to 60 frames per second. However, the 4K on the Canon M50 has a pretty severe crop, and I wouldn't really use it as a 4K camera, but it is a really good HD camera. Both the M50 and the R50 have really solid autofocus, but because the R50 is newer, it has even better autofocus with subject detect, and I would say it is as good as the A7IV's autofocus. Plus, the R50 also allows you to use newer and better RF lenses, and you simply get more variety with that lens lineup, where the M50 still uses the older EOS M mount, which has great lenses, but less variety. So which camera is right for you? Personally, I would pick the R50 simply because right now it's only about $100 more than the M50. But I imagine the M50 is probably going to go even lower in price. So if you want an ultra budget camera, that might be the camera for you. But overall, you'll be really happy with either of these cameras if you're a casual shooter that wants a great camera for both photos and video. Now, like I said earlier, a good camera is very, very specialized. Most cameras do really good photos, but make sacrifices in video, or most cameras do really good video while making sacrifices in resolution. So let's take a look at a few cameras that do both photos and videos really well, and I think they're the best hybrid cameras on the market today. The first camera I want to talk about is one of the most popular cameras to come out in recent memory, and that is the Canon R7. What really blew people away is that it has a 32 megapixel sensor. Though it is APS-C and smaller than the A7IV sensor, however, 32 megapixel sensor in an APS-C body is still a ton of resolution. And because it's an APS-C sensor, it's also a much cheaper camera. So not only do you get the high resolution of the 32 megapixel sensor, but Canon is also known for having really solid in-camera colors that are just vibrant, saturated. They make everything look good. In photo mode, the Canon R7 shoots at a really impressive 15 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode, and in electronic shutter mode, it shoots at a ridiculous 42 frames per second, which is absolutely insane, and it is way faster than the A7IV, making it a really powerful photo camera. And Canon has also updated the autofocus technology in the R7, so the autofocus can actually keep up when you're shooting as high as 30 and 40 frames per second. And I know what you're thinking, but it's not full frame. There's actually a fix for that I'll mention in just a second. When it comes to video, the R7 is truly impressive. It shoots 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, but it's also downsampled just like the A7IV. So you get this rich, detailed 7K image, but manageable 4K file. And it also does 4K at 60 frames per second without an additional crop. Although the crop for the 4K 60 in the R7 and the crop for the 4K 60 in the A7IV are pretty much the same, so you're getting a very similar image. And the R7 also has C-Log for advanced color grading. And the one way that you can turn the R7 into a full-frame camera is by using a device known as a speed booster that uses a reverse magnifying glass to give your APS-C sensor a full-frame view. The one downside is that you can no longer use RF lenses, you have to use older EF lenses, but that's okay because right now RF technology is still very new and the lenses are pretty limited, and the really good lenses are thousands of dollars, so you're actually better off using older EF technology that works just as well, but there's more lenses available and they're also much more affordable. When it comes to the physical design of the R7, there's really not much to say. It's a well-built camera with a side articulating screen, solid menu, solid performing ergonomics. It's just an overall great camera. Along with the robust mirrorless body, you're getting a really solid performing camera that's really the perfect balance between photo and video, with even the option to convert to a full frame sensor. But if you're someone that wants a true native full frame sensor, you should also look at the Canon R6 Mark II. It has pretty much the exact same specs in terms of video and photos as the Canon R7, and it still does 4K downsampled from 6K, but the big reason to get that camera is because it has a native full frame sensor, and it also has the ability to output to an external recorder and record 6K up to 60 frames per second in raw ProRes. And it's only about $500 to $600 more than the Canon R7. The only downside is that you no longer have a 32 megapixel sensor, instead it's a 24 megapixel sensor. And there's one last camera on our list that is so unique and it has features that no one else in the camera industry is currently doing, and that is the Fuji X-H2S. The Fuji X-H2S has a solid metal body with modern ergonomics that are suitable for both photo shooters and video shooters. Plus, it has an LCD screen right at the top so you can see all of your settings right at a glance. This is a feature that pros will really like. Plus, it has a mode dial with 7 different custom shooting setups. You can have one for portraits, for low light, for slow motion, anything you want. This camera is really made for a high-end professional or a very serious enthusiast. But it's doing at a relatively affordable price. And the Fuji X-H2S has 3 really unique features that no one else in the camera industry is currently doing. First up, it has an X-Trans 5 sensor. Now, it is an APS-C sensor with a 26 megapixel resolution, but Fuji has a really unique pixel structure in their sensors where you actually get the detail level and image quality of a full-frame sensor with an APS-C sensor size. And that's really because of the pixel structure, but also because it doesn't use an OLPF filter to soften up the image. Side by side, the Fuji X-H2S looks just as sharp as a much more expensive camera like the A7 IV, and the Fuji camera also comes with 16 built-in film emulations that give you a really stylistic filmic look, and you can even go in and customize each of these film emulations to suit your exact taste. Your photos and videos look really good even before you edit them. Plus, it also has F-Log1 and F-Log2 for more advanced color grading. Photos is where I'm really impressed by the Fuji camera. It shoots a ridiculous 15 frames per second up to 1,000 photos, and it shoots unlimited JPEGs. And it also does 40 frames per second in electronic shutter mode with about 800 photos before it needs a break. And because it's a stacked sensor, you get almost 0 rolling shutter in electronic shutter mode, and you also get much faster autofocus. The autofocus is just about as good as most modern Canon cameras and Sony cameras. But video is even more impressive. It does 6K up to 30 frames per second in 4:3 mode, which is a square aspect ratio. But the image quality in 6K mode is absolutely beautiful, and the 4:3 crop is really useful for vertical video. And one really impressive feature about the Fuji X-H2 is that it does 4K up to 120 frames per second with 0 crop, without any reduction in image quality. This is a really hard feature to find, especially in a mid-tier, more affordable camera like this. One camera that's similar to this that also provides this is the Sony FX30 for about $1,700, but that's not as good as the Fuji. And the main reason for that is that the Fuji camera also has the ability to record ProRes internally. Now, ProRes is a high-end professional format. It's easier to edit, easier to color grade, and it's also just overall faster when you're exporting your video. If you're someone that's a professional that needs to work quickly, ProRes is the way to go, and the fact that the Fuji camera records it internally is a big deal. As an APS-C sensor video and photo camera, I think the X-H2S is one of the best hybrid cameras on the market. And if you guys want to pick up either of these cameras that we talked about today, make sure to check out the links in the description down below for the best pricing on all of the cameras we talked about today. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.